You know, this really is going to be a fun evening. I enjoy a comedian named Lewis Black who does a podcast, and when he begins the podcast, he says, "People, all this could go horribly wrong at any moment." For some reason, that phrase has been in the back of my head for the last few days. But truthfully, as Jess said, she and Al Bond and Dave Whelan were sitting around saying, wouldn't it be nice if we just had some good conversations here at the Avalon with people, and particularly people who live in the area and have an interesting background and doing interesting things, and would you do this? And I said, well, I'd love to do it as long as we don't start with a politician, which is to your benefit, frankly, because there's so many other things to talk about. And I do have 3 dogs. Diane and I have a Comfort Retriever, a Weimaraner, and a Lagotto Romanola, the little Italian truffle dog. They would all be huge distractions if they were here, so I left them at home. But they're here in spirit, and thank you for bringing your dogs. They're also well behaved. You know, I had a sense that I was going to like Meg Olmert as soon as I heard about what she was doing, because I've often reflected and thought about the relationship people have with animals. I had my first Weimaraner we would take to Bethany Beach, and it was always interesting to me that you could walk on the beach with Hannah was her name, with Hannah off leash certain times of the year. And some kids would want to run up to the dog and pet the dog, and the parents would, were all enthusiastic about it, and they would talk to the dog. And some parents would pick up their child and run the other direction. And it's just a different way people relate. So I knew I'd be fascinated with what Meg has done, and I read the book. It's an excellent book. I highly recommend it. It's something that you learn a lot from, and I found as I went through it that I related to lots of parts in the book. Now, if Diane was here, she said, well, yeah, you related to the caveman part, but that could be true, too. And then Diane and I had a long brunch with Meg and got a chance to talk to her. So I come at this with a real appreciation, Meg, for what you're doing. And I wanted to begin our conversation. We'll get to the relationship with animals and all that, but I always think life for everybody is a journey. And I know a little bit about the fact that you started in downtown New York, or in New York, and you found your way to the Eastern Shore, but maybe at the 30,000-foot level. Start by telling us a little bit about this journey and kind of how you ended up here on the Eastern Shore.
Well, thank you, and fun, right? Well, I grew up in New York City, and I never had a pet. Well, except for a turtle. I lived in an apartment complex that didn't allow them.
If you hold the microphone there.
Crazy for animals, and especially dogs. And I'd see people that had them on the street when I was this big, and I'd run up to them, but they were guard dogs, because that's what was out there at the time. Doberman Pinschers. We saw one. There's one here tonight, and it was so exciting to see it. And I'd run up, and they would never bite me. And my parents said that's what gave them gray hair, was the fact that I would just merge. The urge to merge was so powerful. I spent my whole life on a trajectory out of New York to merge with animals. And I did the All Creatures Great and Small thing, working for veterinarians and farmland, and then I ended up at the end of the day with my friend back there working at National Geographic Television on a natural history program. And I got hired to develop a series on the history of humans and animals, which had never been done, and it still has never been done. And in the research, I stumbled across the very beginning days of animal-assisted therapies, and was hearing these amazing stories of wild child, kids who were incarcerated in residential treatment programs because they had such severe behavior disorders and ADHD. They could not live in society. But when they entered this program with these animals, they completely transformed. I went to see these children. You would never have known there was anything wrong with them. They were 15-year-old boys. A tough age for any 15-year-old, but this was extraordinary, the taming of these children. And I said to the scientist who was working with them, I said, well, how could this possibly be? And he said, well, we showed in an earlier study that when you talk to animals, your blood pressure comes down and your heart rate comes down. But when you talk to your best human, it goes up. And I said, that's insane. How could that be? And he said, well, unconditional love in dogs. I said, no, what's the biological mechanism that a dog can trigger in a human that would be this anti-stress effect?
Let me jump in. Because I want you to cover all this, but what I've wondered about when I heard you describe this and when I read about it, is it in the DNA of every human? I mean, some humans seem to have a different kind of relationship with animals, i.e., the people who run in panic.
Yeah.
Is it different, or do people generally possess the ability to have this kind of reaction to animals?
There is a deep-seated primal attraction to animals in all of us. We are social mammals, as are our dogs. Our dogs, our DNA, their DNA and our DNA for the social behavior looks more alike than any other two species on the planet, which is why they are our best friends. But when you say, well, then why do some people go, and others don't? A lot of it is nurture, not nature. If a parent is frightened of a dog because they had maybe a negative experience with a dog, or culturally, you have, like, Muslims do not love dogs. You can pass that along. Babies are supposed to pick up on fear cues from their parents. That's how you survive. So it's really easy to pass along either love or fear, as you see in babies. So if you're lucky enough that your parents didn't instill, whether knowingly or not, fear in you, you haven't, like you were saying, Craig, in my book I go back to 100,000 years ago and I look at Ice Age humans, and we painted animals on the cave walls, over 45 million animals. For 20,000 years, we painted animals. That's how obsessed we were. That was animals. That's how deeply embedded in our emerging consciousness animals are. Now, here we are in the 21st century. It may not seem like it, except in this room. I use this as my, litmus test. We may have moved away from the farm and the sheep, but we sure kept the shepherd, which was absolute instinct on our part. And it was a very smart move, as you will learn.
So let me take you back, because I've always been curious, and I've heard a little bit of the story told, but you have humans roaming the earth who basically, somebody had to do the hunting and the gathering, and there were wolves. And somehow the two got together. And as I've heard, humans changed the wolf, but the wolf also changed the humans. Yeah. Does that
definitely
follow?
One of the great things, when I was writing my book, it was all very hypothetical. I mean, there was no research that really had been done. But I hypothesized that there had to have been a species of wolf that was more dog-like, that was more willing to approach and interact and relax in our presence. And the humans at that time were not us. They were very oriented towards animals. They would have noticed the difference in the glint of an eye of friendship versus prey. And they could have, and so they could have come together. And the people who had a way with animals in the Ice Age were the equivalent of the Bill Gates and the Steve Jobs now. AI was animal intelligence, and that's what got us through to today. So we now know that they have found DNA in ancient wolf skulls, and we can now actually even decode ancient prehistoric DNA, and they have shown that, yes, indeed, it was a distinct species of wolf, not related to the wolf we have today, that our dogs came out of. So they would have been friendlier, more approachable, and more able to relax in our presence. And they were the wolves that became dogs.
So I admire much about you. I love your curiosity and I love your tenacity, which we're going to talk about. But I stopped you at the moment, I think, when you were about ready to have the aha moment, when you were curious about what was causing this relationship between animal and human. So let's go back to that moment.
Okay, so I'm not a scientist, or at the time. I am a scientist now. I was not at the time. But I asked why. And so I asked that question of why would the heart rate come down. The next day in the New York Times, there was an article on the ancient neurohormone called oxytocin, which now I'm sure is familiar with many of you as the love hormone. But they didn't know that at the time. They were just beginning to find it. And I read this interview with two scientists, and they were talking about how, wow, this thing called oxytocin, which we knew caused labor contractions, we knew it caused breast milk ejection, but it's in the brain, and it's in all the sections that control behavior and emotion. And what is it doing there? Well, it was the anti-stress chemical, and it was the pro-social chemical. So when you interrupt oxytocin, we don't remember meeting one another. Well, that can happen now. And, it's hard to lay down social memories. And we don't want to approach people. And you find people with autism deficits, you see in autism. So oxytocin deficit is found in autism. And so it's critical to social behavior, but it's also anti-stress. So I asked, somebody knows how to get a treat. I asked the scientists, I said, well, if it does all that in between mothers and babies, then is that the same chemistry of the human-animal bond? And they went, oh. And then that was that. That's how I...
And about when was this? What?
That was 1993.
I said she's tenacious.
And I didn't let it go. I tried to give it away. I mean, I thought, why would I have this story? But nobody wanted it. And I just said, well, this is the best story never told, and I'm going to tell it.
But didn't the researcher who shared some of this then embrace what you wanted to do? Did you collaborated with these researchers?
I collaborated with them. Yeah, I collaborated with them. They wanted me to write their stuff because I could write and they couldn't. And then they went on to make careers out of it without giving me credit, because that's what happens in science. But it didn't matter because I had written the book, and I staked my claim that way. But and now it's a totally well-known thing, and everybody talks about oxytocin is the biological basis of the human-animal bond, and that's great. I'm glad. And the more studies, it's just phenomenal what they're discovering.
And so now that we know that, you've looked for ways to apply that, not just for those of us who love to have animals around us and dogs in our home, but to actually do therapeutic work. I think that's what's really become exciting, not just in this country, but abroad. So let's start in this country, and then we'll travel around the world.
Well, we have a dog here tonight who there's Kim, came from the Warrior Canine Connection Project in Boyd's, Maryland, that I helped to co-found. And that is a program that uses the training of service dogs to reduce the symptoms of trauma in veterans and active duty service members. And when the guy who started it, named Rick Yant, called me and told me what he was doing, I went, I just wrote the book on that. And so I hooked up with him, and we created Warrior Canine Connection. And we worked really hard to get the science done to prove that this isn't just good dog, good, that you can measure the effect, you can show that it reduces the symptoms of PTSD. And it turns out, after doing 2 randomized controlled trials at Walter Reed, it is as effective, if not more, than the treatments that are on offer. And of course, it's safe and non-pharmaceutical, and it's wildly popular. So it is one of the most effective treatments for trauma, which is a human condition. I mean, you may think of it as like, well, I haven't gone to war recently. Yeah, you have. You know, and so then that was the start of it, and doing the science to prove it.
And is that because of this chemical interaction that you
Right.
first
So
were curious about?
the sight, the sound, the smell, the touch of dogs releases oxytocin in our brains and in the dog's brains. And then oxytocin reduces your stress chemistry and makes you feel calm, and it's a social lubricant. You walk down the street with your dog, you're going to talk to people. You walk down the street by yourself, these people they're not going to come up and talk to you. So it's such a powerful social connection that we have with dogs and with others when we have them. And that's because it's running on the same social brain chemistry that runs all social behavior, including parental, mating, any kind of friendship, runs on this brain chemistry.
So you mentioned something really interesting that I want to take you back to, which is not only is this phenomenon happening in the human, it's happening with the dog.
It's happening with the dog.
And how did you demonstrate, or how did you come on to that understanding?
Oh, we took blood and we took saliva, and there's many studies, because you can do these things in animals that you can't do in humans a lot. No, they show that, or they give dogs inhalant of oxytocin, and they want to be with people more. They look more in your eyes. Exact same reaction that humans have if you do oxytocin inhalant in humans, or just regular. By the way, everybody makes oxytocin, men and women, but it depends on the number of receptors and where you make them in your brain that decides how powerful that reaction is. So when you know somebody who's really gregarious, I wouldn't know anyone like that. I'm loaded with the stuff. And like I said, if you have a deficit of those receptors, then you might end up being pathologically shy, or even further on the spectrum to autism or some kind of disorder that has a big social component to it.
So how and when did the book come about? I know it was published in 2009, but my guess is it's something you worked on for a while.
Oh, yeah, 15 years.
That tenacity thing
yeah,
again.
Yeah. Well, I did it for myself because I had no misconceptions that it would get published. I wasn't a scientist. I had never written a book. Why would anybody publish it? So I just wanted to see if the logic held throughout evolution. Because if at any point it fell apart, then I had the story wrong. And in doing it, I tricked myself into writing the book. Because I'm a one-liner, I'll write your bumper stickers all day. This was massively hard.
And I believe I heard that you actually were on stage when the book came out.
Yeah, I was right here when the book came out.
So I told her she's back by popular demand.
Yeah,
It took a while.
Well, but isn't it interesting? I was saying, yeah, but at the time, now people, after COVID and with a lot that's going on now, people are holding their animals closer than they ever did. People are waking up to how, especially dogs, because dogs really do have the greatest ability to release oxytocin and the social brain neurochemistry in us, which is anti-stress chemistry. And more people own dogs, more people, everybody says, it's my baby. It runs on the same chemistry. You're not insane. It's the same chemistry. So, and now people are having dogs instead of children. And people are finding it easier to love a dog than a lot of people. And so it's an interesting evolution. And what I say is they used to protect us from the enemies without. Now they protect us from the enemies within. Because oxytocin reduces cardiac stress. So and heart attack and stroke are the biggest killers. So now they've shown that having a dog, your chances of survival if you have a heart attack are much greater than if you just have a mate. So now we know a lot more.
So then you've got a book out, you're talking about this, and somebody hears about it, and suddenly you have a project in Uganda. How did that come about?
So I've been doing Warrior Canine Connection and showing, oh my God, these people who were completely isolated, veterans who had seen awful and done awful things and, all of the, on the verge of suicide, and they're coming back to life, and they're back in their communities, and they're back in their families, and now because they've learned how to train a dog, they know how to talk to their child. I mean, it was just powerful stuff. So this woman called me because she read about it, and she had read my book, and she said, we have a program in northern Uganda where we teach people who have survived this grisly 20-year civil war how to train dogs, and we pair them with the dogs that we rescue in our hospital over in Uganda, and they're comfort dogs. It's called the Comfort Dog Project. And I went, do they like dogs in Uganda? And she said, no. They're terrified of them because of rabies. And I said, and this thing still works?
Well, you told me, when you first told me this story, you said they think of them as large rats.
Yeah, they do. They call them garbage. Everybody has them for hunting and protection, but they don't feed them, they don't clothe them. There was no place to take them to a doctor until we opened the only animal hospital in this giant region. And so, the dogs, oh my God, you should have seen them, but you should see the people. They don't look much better. And because 30,000 of them were kidnapped as children and forced to do the most unspeakable things you could ever imagine. And so to hear that this same brain chemistry could cut through. These dogs are the oldest dogs on the planet. They have the oldest DNA. They have never been domesticated. And that the dogs who have only known people to try to kill them, basically, and literally, that they could forgive the humans, and that the humans could overcome their deep and understandable fear of these dogs and find the same kind of relationship and healing was phenomenal. So I went and I saw it for myself. And then I said, I'm in with all four paws. And that's how I became involved with it. And it is extraordinary. And can we do that video? There was talk of maybe.
You know what I think I'm going to do is talk to my friend Dave Whelan, and when we do the story on the spy, we'll put a link to the video.
They said, they came up and told me they could do it.
How here?
Yeah. Well,
we'll see.
Who knows? Oh, geez. Well, no, that's not it. But that's one of the dogs. Let's see if we can get this up, because it's a 3-minute video the BBC did.
And what's happening in Uganda today? What's happening?
Well, we've been at it now 10 years, and 120 survivors, child soldier survivors, have graduated the program, and they're now. They were shunned. They were left to commit suicide because there's only one psychiatrist per million in Uganda. And they're now public health advocates working in the community on big rabies projects and humane education. They're amazingly fabulous, functional human beings who were left to be garbage just like the dogs.
So obviously, I mean, you're here, not there, maybe there occasionally, but you've taught people how they can introduce this whole concept.
Yeah, well, they had actually started it, and I had said when she told me about it, I was just I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and I said, my God, if we could take measures of trauma before and after this 20-week-long program. She said, oh, we've been doing that for years in mud huts. And I said, so I just took all the data and published it, but I can't take credit for it.
It looks like the
okay,
video
here it
is
is. Let's see if we can get sound, too. That's always a good trick.
There we go.
That's Filda. She was kidnapped when she was 12. And that's Loca Roma, her comfort dog. And she was shown when she came back because of the horrible things that had happened to her. She saw her brothers chopped to death. And so that's classic, but I don't think it's going to run. It looks like it's not going to work.
We'll get it up in the
Another
spine.
time.
That'll work.
All you need to do is go to thebigfixuganda.com, and that's the website, and the video is on it. And seeing is believing. I highly recommend you do it because you can't do it justice.
Is this being replicated in other areas now, or?
No, well, not in. No, we're the only canine-assisted trauma therapy in Africa. So it's starting. They're starting to see that. But certainly the only one in Uganda now. But we're the first.
So, I know we have people who brought their dogs. Can I reveal and break the news that you have a cat, which is okay. It's okay. You'll come back over to the.
Who didn't want to come tonight?
Didn't want to come, but I gather that this is not just a relationship between humans and dogs. It's
right, Craig.
I know you talk about horses, for example. I mean, it's like, and I love this. So imagine the first person who said, "I think it'd be a really good idea to get on top of that big animal." Yeah. I mean, that.
Well, let's get on where the lion attacks it.
Yeah, right.
Because that's going to work.
Yeah, right.
It is amazing.
But somehow,
a
bond formed there.
Yeah, and so yes, it is with all animals. As social mammals, we can do this with all social mammals. And my cat is just like a dog because that's how I treated him. He just does everything with me. But yes, horses, amazing. And it's amazing what women are doing with horses. Completely changing the whole field of equitation and human-horse bond. If you are like me and watching Facebook Reels, man, you see the testimonials endlessly of stuff that was supposed to be impossible. Or if you said it, everybody went, "Oh, that's just apocryphal. That doesn't really happen." Like dolphins saving humans. I mean, that was written about by Pliny the Elder. I mean, and everybody just said, "Oh, that was fanciful talk." No, it isn't. This happens. The stories are, and seeing again is believing. So it is with all animals, and that's what I would sort of hope that my book and the science that's coming out now could do would be raise the level of consciousness. Just let's tune this up a bit. Let's take it into the 21st century. Let's know that when you're looking at your dog and when you're talking to your dog, you're releasing the most powerful brain chemistry in the brain. And it is that good for you. And it means you don't take your dog for a walk with earbuds. No. This is your time. Kevin, we have Kevin over here, Kevin Higginbottom. He's a dog trainer. And he'd be the first one to tell you that to train a dog, and it's why dog training is in particular the best trauma therapy, because you have to empathize with the dog. You have to, what are you looking at? What are you seeing? You have to look ahead and set the dog up for success. So if you're walking down the street with a young dog and you see a squirrel, you want to distract the dog, or you want to set it up so that, for success. But to do that, you've got to get out of your own head. And we are caught in our own heads. That we are in an era of narcissism that will kill us as social mammals. It will kill us. Loneliness, I and me, those two pronouns, deadly for us. And so don't just have a dog, be the dog. I mean that. Be as good as your dog is. It's time we started taking lessons from them in how to behave, because they're wildly generous, they're totally forgiving. Yes, they bark. I make some noise too.
I think go back for a few minutes or a little bit on the loneliness piece, because this is, I keep reading, and it's almost epidemic in many places, and particularly young people who they invest a huge amount of time in their devices, not so much having conversations. But can a relationship with an animal interrupt that and get them more focused on interaction, do you think?
Anybody have their dog bother them when they're sitting down looking at their computer tell you, we're done here? Yeah, they do interrupt it. Now, by the way, you can get oxytocin and you can get a sense of connection by virtual connection. When you Zoom call and WhatsApp or whatever you're doing, it does also work a little bit. It's just not as strong. I mean, the physiology did not evolve for that sort of abstract connection. You don't have the sensory factor, which is so key to releasing this brain chemistry. But again, with Warrior Canine Connection during COVID, there was a hospital in New Jersey where they were slammed, and remember COVID? It was awful, and people were dropping like flies, and it was really bad. And in this hospital, one of the nurses put on Warrior Canine Connection's 24-hour puppy cam, because we breed the dogs that we use for service, and they watched the puppies, and from the janitors to the top surgeons, they all came to get their fix. And it was so powerful that afterwards, researchers went and did a study and showed that 5 minutes of watching puppy cam reduced heart rate and blood pressure in the nursing staff, and of course increased their job satisfaction. 5 minutes. So that's, like I say, we've had dogs in our lives for 40,000 years. They've been on our laps, and we haven't really paid attention to who they are or who they could be to us. And that's the great news.
So my little story is our youngest dog, 3 years old, is a Lagotto. And she really tolerates pretty much everything, certainly her 2 older sisters. Were, as I said, a Weimaraner and a Comfort Retriever. But in the morning, and then usually in the evening, she likes to just come up and sit right next to me, put her head on my leg, until I pick up this device. And then, this apparently is the natural enemy of the Lagotto. It gets whacked across the room sometimes, because it's her time. During the day, I can do whatever I want, but those 2, morning and evening, it's her time.
They hate those things.
They hate it.
Kevin, out at Warrior Canine Connection, where we train the dogs for, service dogs, they were training, because we have lots of dogs, lots of labs, and they can be very boisterous when they're all out. It's a farm. It's, really wonderful. But they decided that they better train the dogs, something better cut through in case it ratchet, the play got a little rough, So they taught them how to use a whistle and to come to a whistle and get a treat. So they're in the middle of play, and then all of a sudden it goes like, and it's like, and all the dogs come running over. So we were practicing it, and I was trying it, and they all came running over, and now I've got like 20 dogs going like, treat, treat, treat. And I said, okay, so now what do I do to get rid of them? And he said, take your phone out and look at it. I took my phone out, and they just went and split.
Wow. So we're going to take some questions in just a few minutes here, but I'm guessing that a few people came tonight hoping to get some tips, other than don't wear your earbuds when you walk. I know you're not a professional dog trainer, but you've been around them a lot.
Yeah.
But given all the experience you have, maybe the way to ask the question is, what do you see that improves the relationship between the human and their dog or animal?
Well, what I learned from a horse trainer was horses don't wear watches. So it's a temporal factor. If you ask the dog to do something and it doesn't do it, you wait. And you're patient and you're clear. So it's the same as raising children. Not that I did that, but it's consistency and clarity, patience, those 3 factors. And you don't repeat their name and say, pick it up, pick it up, pick it up. Like, you've lost them. So but the big part is just patience, which takes a lot of emotional control. I mean, it makes you can't change the heart of a dog without changing your own. You just have to be, so paying strict attention, the quality of attention you pay to anything decides the quality of the outcome. And dogs read everything about us. Obviously they've got the big noses. They can smell what you're thinking. And so know that they're that tuned into you, and if they're not doing something, they might be thinking about how they might do it, and just wait, but stay consistent.
Good advice. I think if we raise the lights a little bit, I think Jess has a microphone. Let's go to this side first. Anybody have a question? And we'll take a few questions for a few minutes. Here we go.
Check, 1, 2, check. Our dog Pete is 10 years old, and about 2 years ago, in December through about February, he is now scared to death of gunshots in Oxford, Maryland.
Yeah.
Is there any, and it's new, relatively new. It didn't start when he was young. So I'm curious to get an idea.
Is he a big dog? Yeah.
He's
40 pounds.
Yeah, it's amazing. Big dogs seem to be more than little dogs with that, Kevin, wouldn't you say? Give or take. I don't know of anything that helps that. I mean, they don't do, as far as I know, you don't do the equivalent of prolonged exposure therapy like they do with humans. Like if you have a phobic reaction to a tarantula, you hold it until you decide, that's not so bad. But it's very bad. It's a very tough thing to do, and basically I would just make sure that that he has just a safe place that he feels he can go to. The thunder vests, right?
If you're going to speak to it, I want you to.
Yeah, we got to let Kevin. He's the expert.
Right. Sometimes music will help. Just turning music up,
Kevin.
And it will kind of drown the noise of the gunshots. And it's what you do when the gunshots go off. How do you soothe your dog?
There it is.
So that's very important. And you could be causing an issue versus helping
Right.
solve the problem.
Yeah, you don't want to ratchet it up.
Right. You definitely don't want to ratchet
That's
it
what
up.
we teach our service members who have trauma, and they're going out, like they have to go on the subway with these young dogs. And it's calm, confident leadership that you try to provide, and they fake it till they make it, and then they actually discover that going down onto the subway is safe. Both the veteran and the dog discover it pretty much at the same time. So yeah, I think that's excellent advice, is just don't ratchet it up. And the music, just not the overture.
I did an exercise one time, to your point. I did an exercise one time with horses, and I've been around horses all my life. I've not owned a horse, but the exercise was teaching people to relax around a large animal, stand next to the horse, and you do something, tap it, so that it will present its hoof to you. Now, the horse knows exactly what it's supposed to do. For people who are nervous, the horse would not do a thing. For people that were relaxed, that the foot came up every time. And it really taught you how much the animal is watching how you're reacting as much as anything else.
Think about it. They've been our captive audience for a very long time, and human behavior, their lives depend on it. So they are very good students of us. But that's why using horses in trauma therapy is very interesting, because they're a prey animal. And the dogs are predators, but they're a prey animal, and they have that nervous system of a prey animal, fight, flight, and so it's interesting because when you have post-traumatic stress disorder, it's the equivalent of having your fight, flight nervous system stuck in the on position. And so when you interact with a horse, and a guided interaction, and you learn how to do that, you have to model from the nervous system forward what you want to communicate, and they're biofeedback machines, and it's honest feedback. You go to see a human therapist, and you might not like him very much. You might think, he's full of shit, that guy. But you never say that about a horse or a dog or something. They're really the honest brokers.
Another one?
Don't be shy.
Oh, you're over.
I am,
Jess
but I'll
is
go
over
to
here?
anyone I can
Here's
walk.
one up here, Jess.
Perfect.
So I have the Doberman you were talking about, and I've had Dobermans before. And my first Dobie became a certified therapy dog, which was unique for Dobermans to be in the program.
Yeah.
They're mostly smaller dogs.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious in terms of your experience with that particular program and working with them, because I've seen some pretty amazing things. She worked at St. Vincent's Hospital in New York in the geriatric.
I was born there.
She was in the geriatric ward and the oncology ward, and she thrived in that. But I was just curious what your experience with that particular program has been.
Well, therapy dogs are different. I worked with service dogs that were for mobility and all sorts of disabilities, so psychological or physical. Therapy dogs, it's a much different range of dog that you can use for a therapy dog. Basically, you want a dog that's lovely, that makes people go, huh, that's all. You're not asking them to pull a wheelchair. You're not asking them to turn the light switch on. All of those things. It's just a dog that makes your heart go, huh. And it does. They've shown that having a dog in the hospital or nursing home or any of those things, heart rate comes down, blood pressure comes down, immune system functions better, lung pressure comes down. We're not making this stuff up. And people, you say, oh yeah, well, I do feel better when my dog is around. And okay, I have a cat, 7 pounds. I feel safer having that cat around. Like, what's he going to do? Any of these dogs are probably going to lick somebody to death, but you feel safer in it. That's how deep this thing is. They made us feel safer. They could see beyond the campfire. They gave us our first good night's sleep. Knowing they were out there with their super senses and their super strength allowed us to sleep and perchance to dream. And that's how we grew our imaginations and our big brains. We owe them everything. Even you.
Great point.
Yes, go in here.
There's one.
Do you ever watch Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer?
Yes.
And what do you think of his approach?
I know people don't like him, and I know that I get in trouble when I say there are things about him I think are great. His timing is excellent. He does this thing about the dominance, wolf dominance, that is very much out of favor with ethologists. But he knows animals. He knows dogs. He knows how they move. He can move amongst them. A big problem that you have, I'm sure Kevin will know all this too, is with dog trainers, is you try to mimic it, but if you don't have what they have, like a big part of Caesar's success is he's calm. Those dogs don't frighten him. And so he has that ability to, get in when the owners are scared stiff of their dogs. And he just comes in and it's like, nope, try that with someone else. So there's certain things about him that are very good. And then I've heard that he does coercive things. He kicks them, he lays them down. There's certain things that are people don't love at all. But I still see him as somebody who has a pretty amazing way with dogs. And I just appreciate that anybody in the 21st century that is paying that close attention.
My story on that, Jess will look for another question, is I was walking along in Alexandria, Virginia one day, and I get to a gas station, and out of the gas station comes a pit bull. Comes right over to me. I kneel down. I was friendly. Dog was friendly. The gas station guy comes running out, screaming at me, "It's a pit bull! It's a pit bull!" I said, "I know it's a pit bull." I said, is it your dog? He said, no. We locked it in the bays. We locked it up, and we tried to get a rope around its neck. And I said, how did that work out? Well, not so good. And I said, really, the dog is very calm. And he said, well, let me get the rope. And then he gets it, and he tries to reach down. I said, no, let me put the rope on the dog. Dog's fine. Of course, the dog had a tag on, had a phone number on. I called the phone number, and a very nice young woman answered, and she said, oh my gosh, I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to control the dog, and they're like describing a dog that I'm not seeing. And she said, could you bring it back? And I said, well, I think not that far from you. I'm at the gas station. She said, I know, it's my sister's dog. I don't know where the gas station is. I said, okay, well, I know what the address is. It did take me into a housing project, but I'm a big guy. I have a pit bull. I got this whole group of guys who are following me around from the neighborhood saying, man, that's a pit bull. I said, yeah, do you know the dog? Yeah, we don't go near that dog. So the dog couldn't have been nicer. So Max was his name. So I get to the house, knock on the door, and a nice young woman answers, and she says, oh, thank goodness, my sister would kill me. Could you bring it inside and put it in the crate? And well, I don't know. I guess so, sure. So I do. I put it in the crate, and I start to close the door. And she says, wait a minute. You got to get the other dog in the crate. I mean, this was a woman who should not be around dogs. Anyway, point of all that is, if you're kind, and the dog can be very, very nice.
Well, and people are prejudiced against all sorts of things. You remember when Dobermans were the big scary? That was when I was growing up. It was Dobermans, and they're the biggest wusses. But yeah, it happens.
It happens. There's one.
Yep.
Meg, could you tell us again where we can find that video on the Uganda project?
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, it's thebigfixuganda.com. .org, excuse me. .org is the website, and I have to say, it's the most amazing story I've ever seen. It's audacious, the idea that this program was put forth and that it works the way it works.
So since we're recording this great talk today, we'll make sure that everybody who purchased a ticket gets an email that includes the video to this, but we'll also include the link that she's sharing, so you don't have to try to remember it in your head.
And I'm pretty sure we'll get it in the Spy tomorrow.
Yeah, and there's a password. I hope you can remember it. No, I'm only kidding.
Meg, Charlie here.
Oh, hi, Charlie.
You haven't mentioned seeing eye dogs, but we have a friend that we've known, Anne's known forever, since she was a baby, and she was blind from birth. Anyway, through her and others, we learned about the astonishing effectiveness of seeing eye dogs. And part of it was the seeing eye dogs were trained from the very, very, very youngest age to be habituated to human beings. And I knew a couple, a lawyer and his wife was a federal judge, and they accepted the formation, if you will, the bonding from the from 6 or 8 weeks of the dog, so they were in human contact all the time, evidently. And this federal judge, they had to keep the dog for a year or 18 months or something like that before they turned it back over. And the federal judge used to take it to court and have this puppy at her feet during her hearings and things like that, and excuse herself to take the dog away, and because the deal was you had to be inseparable. So how does that work for seeing eye dogs?
Well, it is that intense bond that they do have of 24/7 connection. It's sort of like they do that with working dogs too, with your dog. The shepherds, they put, well, with some of them, they'll put them to be raised and imprint upon the sheep that they will herd. So it is that imprint, that total bond that is formed. But I'll tell you a story. In Uganda, the guy who is our psychologist at our program, Francis, was blinded at age 11 during the Civil War. And he survived, which is amazing because, being blind in northern Uganda is not a good idea. And his father managed to get him into school, but he was really treated badly by others. Blind was not good in Uganda. And so 2 dogs, stray dogs, befriended him and guided him to school and to the latrine at night. They'd hear the tapping of his cane, and they came and they guided him. And that's how he knew. He was one of the rare people when Sarah Schmidt, who started the program, was thinking about how could she do this? How could she save these people? She was already saving the dogs and the animals, but the people needed saving too. And she met Francis, and he got a degree in psychology, and he said, well, yes, I know dogs can help. And so together they created the Comfort Dog Project. But he's a rare person who knew that dogs could be best friends and do all these amazing things. So there is, and there's a video of a crow that acts as a guide to a blind kitten. There's the sense of vulnerability brings out the nurturing, I think, in all of us, I hope. So I think that when you're together constantly, and they're trained, they're also trained, highly trained, but not very few make that cut. That's a very special dog that becomes a seeing eye dog. You can have the heart like crazy, but not many make that cut.
Meg, thank you for coming. I'm so excited by everything that you're doing. And to answer the guy with the gunshot problem, I had a Jack Russell that had a thunder problem. And I found that it was very, the bottom line is watch what you are rewarding. And you don't want to reward fear. So when my dog looked frightened, if there was a big crash, I would say, wow, that was a big
party.
A party.
Party.
Yeah, and after a while, he would go, hey, but there was thunder. Where's my treat? Kind of a thing.
Well, that's how we train the service dogs. Like, the guys will be out, and a dumpster door will slam or something. And these are people who, when that happens, they want to jump in the dumpster.
Yes.
They have trauma. But they have to say, party, wasn't that great? Wasn't that great? And show the dog that that's a very good point. And with humans, don't reward bad behavior. Note to self.
Take the game away. It's the worst thing that you can do to a dog.
Yeah.
I think maybe we have time for 1 or 2 more, and we are going to go over to, after we finish here in just a few moments, we're going to go over to the lounge. I like to call it the spin room because we do political stuff. That's where, but right next door, and you'll find books and can visit a little bit more with Meg. Any other? Maybe one last question.
I'd like to say one thing. I can't thank you all enough, and I can't thank these really good dogs too.
Really good dogs.
I mean,
I know. I'm pretty impressed. I will say I was terrified, but thank you guys for your well-behaved dogs.
Did you want to?
Could I just read one quick thing to wrap it up? Okay. It's just the last paragraph of my book. Okay. We may exist because we think, but we live because we love. And a growing number of people are finding it easier to love animals than humans. The role of the human-animal bond in this century would seem to be a variation of the function it played in helping make us civilized human beings. As the human-animal bond that supported our great social institutions is weakened by short-term, long-distance love, we feel compelled to reach out to all animals and hold them closer than ever. Deep down inside, we're hoping they will keep our hearts and minds open until our own species can settle down again and act civilized. And they will. We just have to ask them nicely.
Well said. Well said.
That was such a great conclusion, but I will say it looks like my tech team finally has your video up. Do you guys want to take 3.5 more minutes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And then at the end, we'll all give her the big round of applause again. Okay, but it'll be a very quiet one. But yes, thank you.
This dog saved my life. If it wasn't for him, I would be dead.
Filda was abducted and forcibly recruited into the rebel army in northern Uganda when she was 13. She witnessed some of the worst atrocities and saw her brothers tortured and killed in front of her. By the time she managed to escape, she was suicidal and suffering from PTSD.
When I came back home, I had terrible nightmares about how my brothers were killed and the terrible things that happened to me in captivity. But the people in the village taunted me and spoke badly about me. They called me a murderer and said I was cursed by the spirits.
She was given her dog by the Comfort Dog Project. The NGO helps transform the region's stray and unwanted dogs into healing therapy animals for former child soldiers and survivors of war struggling with PTSD, trauma and depression.
His name is Lokoroma. It means no more gossip. Your words can't hurt me.
A dog that has suffered should be able to help someone who has gone through trauma.
Francis was blinded by a bomb blast in his village when he was 12 years old. He realised the healing potential of dogs when two of them gradually befriended him and began guiding him to and from school.
I felt dogs can help people rehabilitate their psychological conditions so that they have the company, gain confidence, and also overcome depression.
He trained as a psychologist and set up the Comfort Dog Project in 2015 to help people recover from mental health conditions. During the 5-month therapy program, the Comfort Dog Guardians learn to train and care for their dogs. The group also undergoes extensive trauma counselling to help them process their past experiences.
When they gave me Lokoroma, they started teaching me about how to control my anger and how to deal with my emotions. So when I feel that moment of rage, I call him next to me, start rubbing his back, and then I feel better. I just focus on him.
But it's still a challenge for the project to gain acceptance.
In northern Uganda, people use dogs for hunting, guarding homes, and also they look at dogs as useless.
And even though Uganda's Ministry of Health estimates about 70% of people in northern Uganda have been traumatically affected by the war, there's still stigma around mental health services.
People think the moment you go to mental health, you are already mentally disoriented, you cannot be helped.
But attitudes in the community are starting to change. As part of her recovery, Filda assists with veterinary outreach and educates people on dog training, animal rights and welfare.
When I begin to talk and Lokoroma is near me, he gives me the strength and courage to start talking. I really had a difficult life, but with Lokoroma, now that has changed. It's easy.
Again, it's really hard not to clap loud, so everybody can just raise their heads again. Shake them.
I think you can clap for that. Meg, I want to, on behalf of everybody, thank you so much. I think I speak for everyone that we're glad you're so curious and tenacious and smart and a great writer, and thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you, Dave, and thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you to the Avalon. Yay.
See you in the lounge.